My name is Tori Townsend, and at 31 years old, I finally thought I was getting my moment. But just 2 weeks before I was set to walk down the aisle, my mother called. She told me, in a voice as casual as if she were canceling a routine dentist appointment, that she and my father wouldn't be coming. They were flying to Dubai instead, all to support my brother Derek's new store opening. She told my aunt later that night that I would understand because I always do. But she didn't know my father-in-law had already bought a brand new tie for my big day, or that a documentary crew was about to film every single second of it. What happened next, and what 14 million strangers ended up watching online, is the exact reason my mother now calls me sobbing every single Sunday. None of them knew what was coming when they boarded that flight to Dubai. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where we share stories of deep betrayal, hard-earned justice, and the courage to walk away from toxic relatives. If my story resonates with you, please subscribe and leave a comment. That afternoon, I was in the living room of my fiancé's mother, Janet Calloway. Janet is 59 years old, a pediatric nurse, and the warmest soul you will ever meet. We were trying on delicate lace wedding veils. She had pinned 3 different options into my hair and was happily stepping back to take some photos of me when my phone started ringing on the coffee table. I looked down and saw her name flashing on the screen. Mom. I answered on the second ring because some old habits are just incredibly hard to break, no matter how much they hurt you. She did not even say hello. She did not bother to ask how my wedding preparations were going or if I was doing okay. Instead, she just dove right in. Tori, honey, your father and I talked it over, and we need to be in Dubai for Derek's store opening. It is on the exact same weekend. I stood there, frozen, with yards of delicate white tulle pinned to my head, completely speechless. She just kept talking, telling me how Derek had worked on this for 2 years, how big investors were flying in, and how he desperately needed family support. I stood there in absolute silence for 4 long seconds. I actually counted them in my head. Finally, I managed to ask, "What about my wedding?" She brushed it off instantly. "Oh, Tori, you have Liam's family," she said. "You will be surrounded by plenty of people who love you, and we will celebrate with you when we get back from our trip. We can do a nice dinner, just the family." She said it so casually, like she was canceling a hair appointment she could easily reschedule. She was light, quick, and already moving on to the next task on her daily list. I just whispered, "Okay," and hung up the phone. Janet set her camera down, looked at my pale face, and walked over to wrap her arms around me. She did not ask a single question. She just held me close. This was not the first time they had done this to me. Not the 5th, and not even the 10th. When I graduated from college, my parents arrived 2 whole hours late to the ceremony. Derek had an audition for a modeling agency that morning, and my mother prioritized driving him across town over my graduation. By the time they finally walked into the auditorium, I had already crossed the stage and received my diploma. My father just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, we saw the live stream anyway." Then, when I got promoted to lead engineer at 27, I planned a nice celebratory dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant. She canceled on me 3 hours before because Derek suddenly needed a ride to the airport. When I had shoulder surgery the following year, my mother did not even bother to call. She just sent a quick text message saying, "Sending prayers, sweetheart. Keep us updated." She did not visit me once. Derek was visiting from Los Angeles, and she claimed she could not miss a single second with him because his visit was so short. I eventually stopped counting their betrayals after the 26th time. Yes, 26 times they chose to show up for Derek while leaving me completely abandoned. My Aunt Ruth told me once while we sat in her kitchen letting our coffee grow cold that my mother saw me as the strong one. She actually believed that because I was strong, I did not need her love. That coffee tasted incredibly bitter. Her favorite phrase was always, "Tori will understand." My mother used those 3 words like a skeleton key, unlocking her way out of every single maternal obligation she had to me. She said it to my aunt. She said it to my uncle. And she whispered it to my father whenever he showed a tiny bit of hesitation about leaving me behind. And the absolute worst part of it all was that for 31 years, she was completely right. I did understand. I understood that I would always come second in their lives. I still have the exact blue felt-tip pen I used to write to her. It is the kind of pen that bleeds into the paper if you press too hard. That night, I sat at my table and wrote them a quiet, desperate plea. I wrote, "Mom, Dad, this is the most important day of my life. I need you there. Not for the wedding photos, and not just for the sake of tradition. I need you there because I still want to believe we can be a real family. Please do not miss this one. Love, Tori." I was so anxious that I asked my Aunt Ruth to hand-deliver the letter. She drove 40 minutes to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon just to give it to them. She told me later that my mother took the envelope, barely glanced at my handwriting, and just tossed it on the kitchen counter next to a pile of junk mail. When I asked if she had opened it, Ruth got quiet and said, "Not while I was there." I tried to tell myself she would read it later. I desperately wanted to believe that my words would actually reach her heart. I hoped that this time, the handwritten truth of her only daughter's feelings would be enough to stop her from booking a flight to the other side of the world. But 2 weeks later, Aunt Ruth stopped by their house again to pick up a casserole dish. She saw my invitation still sitting on that same kitchen counter. It was in the exact same spot, sitting at the same angle, and still completely sealed. My mother had never even opened it. She left my heart sitting on that counter, wedged between a catalog and a stack of expired grocery coupons, and she booked her plane tickets to Dubai that very same week. I know exactly when she booked them because Derek bragged about it, forwarding the flight confirmation email directly to our family group chat. Business class, 2 seats, booked with absolute excitement. I had met my fiancé, Liam Calloway, at a mutual friend's barbecue 5 years ago. He is 33 now, an environmental engineer who spends his weekdays testing soil samples and his weekends working on garden projects in our yard. He is quiet, steady, and listens to you with his whole soul. But the person who truly changed my life was not just Liam. It was his incredible father, Warren Calloway. Warren is 62, a retired principal with a gravelly voice and hands that can fix anything. The very first time Liam brought me to his parents' house for Sunday dinner, I stood frozen in the doorway, holding a cheap bottle of wine in front of me like a protective shield. Warren walked straight up to me, gently took the bottle from my hands and said, "Tori, you do not need to earn a seat at our table. You have had one since the moment Liam told us about you." I had to fight back tears, and I think he knew how much those words meant to me. Over the next 5 years, Warren became the loving father I had always dreamed of having. He called me every single Sunday, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared about my life. He even showed up at my office for a big work presentation. He sat proudly in the very back row of a sterile conference room full of senior engineers, and he gave me a warm thumbs up the second he saw me looking nervous. In stark contrast, my own father had forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row. He never even bothered to learn what I actually did for a living. The last time I tried explaining my engineering career to him, he just nodded blankly and asked, "So, you fix computers?" Warren never got confused about my career. He actually read an entire article about financial technology just so he could ask me insightful questions at dinner. When my father finally called me 4 days after my mother did, I could tell she had forced him to do it. He started with, "Sweetheart, I know this is not what you wanted to hear." I snapped back and asked him, "Then why are you saying it?" He sighed and said, "We can only be in one place, Tori." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Derek's investors are flying all the way in from Singapore, and this is his absolute big break. If his own parents are not there, it sends the wrong message to everyone." I looked at the phone and asked, "And what message does missing your only daughter's wedding send to people?" He did not have an answer for that. He just repeated the same cold line. "You have Liam's family. You will be fine." I sat in silence for hours after that, staring at the wall. There was no apology. There was only the quiet assumption that someone else would easily step in to take their place, and that Tori would understand, like she always did. Liam found me sitting alone on our back porch that evening. The sun was setting behind the old oak trees, and I was just staring blankly at my phone on the wooden railing as if the device itself had betrayed me. When Liam asked what my father had said, I told him, "He said I will be fine." Liam sat down quietly beside me. He did not try to force comfort or touch me right away. We just watched the sky turn a deep, dark orange before he gently told me, "You will be fine, Tori, but not because of them." That night, my brother Derek sent a text. His message simply said, "I will make it up to you." There was no actual plan, no specific offer to help, and not a single follow-up question about my wedding day. It was just 6 hollow words tossed into the void, like a cheap coin thrown into a fountain, making a lazy wish that cost him absolutely nothing. I did not bother replying to him. Instead, on Thursday evening, I drove over to Warren's house. Janet was working a night shift at the hospital, but the warm porch light was glowing. I could see Warren through the screen door, reading a book with his glasses slipped down his nose. When I knocked, he smiled and said, "Tori, come in. The coffee is still warm." We sat outside on the porch. I looked down at my hands and whispered, "My father chose Dubai." Warren slowly set his coffee mug down on the wooden railing and looked at me. I took a deep breath and asked, "Warren, would you walk me down the aisle?" He did not say a single word for 10 long seconds, but he did not have to. His face told me everything. His eyes began to redden at the corners, his jaw tightened, and he pressed his lips together the way men of his generation do when they are trying desperately not to let their tears fall. Finally, he cleared his throat and whispered, "I would be honored, Tori, more than you will ever know." Just then, I heard a quiet rustle behind the screen door. Janet had come home early. I still see her standing just inside the kitchen, a dish towel pressed to her mouth as tears ran down her cheeks. In that heavy silence, Warren reached across the space between our chairs and squeezed my hand. Firm, steady. "We are going to make it a good day," he told me. I believed him. Not because of the promise, but because in 5 years, Warren Calloway had never once told me something he did not mean. My biological father never bought a tie for me in his life, but Warren bought a navy blue one the very afternoon I asked. He later said it was his most important purchase ever. Back then, Liam's roommate Marcus Chen shared a dorm with him where the mini fridge hummed so loud they could not sleep. Marcus eventually became a documentary filmmaker. Not the flashy Netflix kind, but a true indie creator. He built a YouTube channel with 48,000 subscribers, focusing on short, intimate pieces about real-life milestones. He captured first-generation college students, immigrant small business owners, and couples who eloped during the pandemic. 6 months before our wedding, Marcus pitched Liam a concept for a miniseries called Modern Ceremonies. He wanted raw, unscripted footage of real people. Liam loved the idea and brought it to me, and I agreed. Marcus was always incredibly respectful. He never pushed us, always asked permission before filming, and lived by a strict rule. If anyone at the wedding asked him to stop shooting, his camera went down instantly. What Marcus did not know when he packed his 2 cameras and tripod into his rental van was that our ceremony was about to unfold in a way he could never have anticipated. "I just want to capture what is real," he told us over dinner the week before. He believed that real moments are what people truly connect with. Liam nodded in agreement while I silently sipped my water. I never told Marcus about my parents. There was no reason to. The documentary was supposed to be about the wedding, not the painful absences. It was about the love filling the room, not the empty chairs left by the very people who should have been there. But reality has a way of forcing itself into the frame, including the painful parts you never planned to script. When Marcus pointed his lens at those 2 white chairs in the front row, each carrying a paper sign that read, "Reserved," he captured the exact thing I never wanted on camera. He captured the raw truth. If you have ever had your own family choose their own convenience over your most important milestone, you know the hollow ache I felt standing there. What happened at my wedding, and what 14 million people ended up watching online, is a memory that still haunts me. It is something I carry with me and think about every single day. Janet was the one who took me dress shopping, alongside my best friend Nora and my cousin Sarah. There we were, 4 women in a boutique in Hartford on a rainy Saturday morning, armed with endless opinions and packs of tissues. The consultant brought out 5 gowns, and I tried on 3 of them. The 3rd dress was the magic one. It had a gorgeous A-line cut, delicate lace sleeves, and a perfect neckline. But when I stepped out of the fitting room and saw my reflection, a heavy ache shifted in my chest. I reflexively turned to my left, expecting to see my mother's face. Her chair was completely empty. It was a cream settee near the window, decorated with a pillow that read, "Here comes the bride." There was absolutely no one sitting on that settee. Nora was perched on the opposite couch, and Sarah was standing over by the mirror. Janet stood right behind me, already reaching for the veil to place it on my head. She noticed my sudden, lingering gaze at the empty seat. Stepping closer, she gently adjusted the delicate lace on my shoulder. "You look like everything good in this world, Tori," she whispered softly. I blinked twice, fighting back the tears, and looked back at my reflection in the glass. But later that evening, alone in my room, I made the painful mistake of opening up my Instagram feed. My mother, Pamela, had posted a photo of herself and my brother Derek at the Dubai Mall. It featured dramatic floor-to-ceiling glass, lush palm trees, and Derek grinning in a fresh linen shirt. She stood next to him holding a shopping bag with a caption that read, "So proud of my boy, family supporting family." I stared at those 4 words until they blurred. I set my phone face down on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. Liam rolled over in the dark, asking if I was okay. I told him I would be. I was not sure if I was lying yet, but I was getting closer to the truth. The next day, we arrived at our venue, a vineyard estate 20 minutes outside of Stamford, to set up the white chairs. Right in the front row, on the bride's side, were 2 chairs on the far left. I had placed white paper signs on them, held down with small stones, each marked with the word reserved. Nora quietly walked up next to me and asked if we should just remove the signs. I stood there, staring at those 2 empty seats for what felt like an eternity. They looked identical to all the other chairs on the lawn, but they felt infinitely heavier. It was as if 31 years of skipped birthdays and half-hearted phone calls had settled deep into the wood. "Leave them," I told her. "They made their choice, and those chairs need to reflect that." Unbeknownst to me, Marcus was standing behind us, filming. I had no idea Marcus caught that raw moment until weeks later when his documentary went viral. Suddenly, 14 million people saw me standing in front of those 2 empty chairs, arms crossed, trying to process the space my parents left behind. 2 white chairs, 2 paper signs, reserved for the 2 people who should have cared enough to be there. I turned and walked toward the reception tent. Liam was busy adjusting speakers, while Warren helped string lights along the canopy. Janet was carefully arranging place cards with the precision of a pediatric nurse. My Aunt Ruth had arrived that morning with a car full of pastries and a warm hug. My real family was right here. My real family was there, just not the biological one I was born into. The guilt trip started 3 days before the wedding. My mother's older brother, Uncle Pete, called first, claiming my mom was beside herself and begging me to change the date by even a single week. I told him the date had been set for 8 months. He kept insisting that family is family and I only have one mother. I closed my eyes and reminded him that she only gets one daughter's wedding too. He hung up and never called back. Then my father's sister, Aunt Linda, sent a long text lecturing me about honoring my parents and how weddings come and go, but parental bonds are eternal. Aunt Linda ended her message by telling me she hoped I would reconsider and show some grace. I read those cold words twice and chose not to respond. But then my phone rang, and it was Ruth. Ruth was the one who had driven 40 minutes to my mother's house just to deliver her invitation in person, only to see it sitting sealed and ignored on the counter. She was the only person in my mother's family who had ever had the courage to call out my mother's selfishness directly to her face. "I am flying in on Thursday," Ruth declared. "I will be there for the rehearsal, I will be there for the ceremony, and I will be sitting right in that front row on your side." I told her she did not have to do that, but she cut me off. "Tori, listen to me," she said. "Your mother is completely wrong. I told her so last Tuesday, and I will tell her again on Sunday. You deserve real family there, and I am your family." Then she paused, her voice softening. "I should tell you something," she added. "That invitation you wrote her is still sitting on the counter, sealed. She never even opened it." Deep down, I already knew. But hearing the brutal confirmation that my mother had not even bothered to read my invite made the hard decision I had been avoiding for weeks feel completely inevitable. The next night, our rehearsal dinner began at Warren's house. We had 40 people gathered in Warren's backyard, sitting under gorgeous string lights that Liam and his brother had spent the entire afternoon hanging. There were folding tables, draped in simple checkered cloths, overflowing with Janet's famous pot roast and Ruth's homemade lemon pastries. Nora had brought 3 bottles of wine and a custom playlist she spent 2 weeks curating just for us. The whole atmosphere felt like real family, the kind of family that actually shows up and stays when things get difficult. At the end of the meal, Warren stood up holding a glass of iced tea since he never drank alcohol. He cleared his throat, and the yard fell silent as he prepared to speak. "Family is not always defined by blood," he began. "Sometimes it is simply the people who choose to show up. The ones who drive 40 minutes just to deliver an invitation, or who fly across the entire country because they gave you their word. It is the people who string lights in a backyard because that is what you do for those you love." Then, Warren looked directly at me. "I did not get a daughter when Liam was born," he said softly. "But I got one 5 years ago when Tori walked through my front door, holding a bottle of wine, looking terrified we would turn her away." "We never will," he promised. Hearing those words, I finally let myself cry. It was the first time I had cried in 2 weeks. They were not the painful tears of grief and anger I had been fighting off for so long. These were entirely different, flowing from a place of deep warmth and safety. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus filming from near the rose bushes, quietly capturing close-ups of Warren's hands on his glass, Ruth wiping her eyes, and Liam watching me with so much love from across the table. I wondered what kind of story Marcus was piecing together. I had no idea that the story had already written itself, or that the entire world was about to read it. Later that night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling fan, trying to quiet my racing mind. My attempts to clear my head failed, so I made the mistake of picking up my phone and opening Instagram. My mother, Pamela, had posted another photo. She was at a lavish rooftop restaurant with the glittering Dubai skyline behind her, seated before gold-rimmed plates. Derek sat across from her in a designer blazer, raising a glass to the camera. Her caption read, "Celebrating our boy's dream coming true. Family first, always." I stared at those last 3 words until they did not even look like English anymore. My father, Glenn, had not posted a thing, which was normal since social media was Pamela's domain, but I spotted him sitting quietly in the background of Derek's post. There it was on my screen, a flawless family portrait. A selfie of my mother and father, smiling side by side under the blazing Dubai sun, captioned with words like dreams, family, and blessed. My father had that same hollow look he always wore in photos, present in body but completely absent in spirit. Meanwhile, my brother Derek posted his own story, a looping boomerang of clinking champagne glasses. He tagged my mother but left me completely out of it. He did send a lazy direct message, though, saying, "Wish you could be here, sis. This place is insane." No mention of my wedding. Not one single word. I took a quick screenshot. Not for revenge, but because I needed something real to remind me of where I stood. I opened my notes app and typed 6 words directly beneath that saved screenshot. This is who they chose to be. After that, I set my phone down, clicked off the lamp, and spent the night staring at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark until the sun finally broke through the window. Today, I was getting married, and for the first time, I did not wish my parents were coming. In the quiet morning hours, Ruth slipped into the bridal suite as I was lacing up my shoes. She closed the door behind her, sat on the edge of my bed, and held up her phone. "I was not going to show you this," she said softly, "but you deserve to know." She turned the screen toward me, revealing a group text thread from 3 weeks ago. It was a group chat between Pamela, Glenn, Derek, Ruth, and Uncle Pete. My mother, Pamela, had sent the first message at precisely 9:47 on a Thursday morning. "Derek's store opening is confirmed for June 14th. We need to be there. Tori will understand. She always does. Derek needs us there. This is his moment." My father, Glenn, replied a mere 12 minutes later. "She will be fine. Liam's family will take care of it." Then Derek chimed in, sending nothing but a single thumbs-up reaction. No questions, no hesitation, just a digital thumb pointing upward, as if my wedding was nothing more than a casual restaurant recommendation he was quickly acknowledging. That was when Uncle Pete typed, "Are you sure about this, Pam?" My mother quickly replied, "Pete, don't start. Tori is the strong one. She doesn't need us hovering. Derek does." I read through that short exchange twice, and then a third time, my chest tightening with every word. I zoomed in on the exact timestamps, studying who read the message first, when they looked at it, and how long they waited before responding. It was painful to realize they had not simply forgotten my wedding. They actually discussed it, weighed my special day against a store opening in Dubai, and decided that I was not worth the price of a plane ticket. This was not a simple scheduling conflict or an honest mistake. It was a deliberate choice, documented forever in black and white. And there it was, the exact sentence I had heard my entire life. The one that followed me from childhood through college, through every surgery, promotion, and milestone they managed to miss. It was typed out by my mother's own hand on that screen. Tori will understand. She always does. Ruth gently reached out and took my hand, whispering, "Now dry your eyes. You have got a beautiful wedding to get to." I handed her phone back and looked at myself in the mirror. Pressing a tissue under each eye, I set my jaw. My mother was right about one thing. I did understand. As I stood up, Janet fastened the last button of my dress. Nora adjusted the hem on her knees, and Ruth pinned my veil with steady hands while Sarah held the mirror. Marcus was filming quietly from the corner of the room, so still that I completely forgot his camera was rolling. I stared back at my reflection. The dress was absolutely everything I had ever wanted. Delicate lace sleeves, an elegant A-line skirt, and a simple neckline that framed my collarbones beautifully without trying too hard. My hair was pinned into a soft, low twist with a few loose strands framing my temples, and my makeup was light. I wanted to look like myself today, not some polished caricature designed to impress people who did not even care to show up. The hurt girl who used to cry in her car after lonely Thanksgiving dinners was gone. The woman in the mirror had finally made her peace. I was simply done reaching out to people who had already let go of me. I slid my phone onto silent and placed it face down on the vanity, determined not to look at it again. "Ready?" Nora asked softly. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. Janet gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. "You look absolutely beautiful, Tori." Ruth then leaned in close and whispered, "Your mother is a complete fool." I almost laughed at that. Almost. Suddenly, a gentle knock came at the door, followed by Liam's voice. "Dad is outside. He said he has been ready since sunrise." I picked up my bouquet of white peonies, held the ribbon Nora had hand-sewn, and walked toward the door, never looking back. I did not check for a last-minute text from my mother, Pamela. I did not wait for my father, Glenn, to call with a sudden change of heart. I just walked forward. Warren was waiting for me at the far end of the hallway, looking sharp in a navy suit and a brand-new tie. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the overhead corridor lights in the leather. He stood with his hands folded neatly in front of him, the exact same way he had probably stood at every school assembly for 30 years. Composed, upright, and waiting patiently for his cue. But as I drew closer, I noticed his hands were shaking. Liam had checked on him 20 minutes earlier, asking, "You okay, Dad?" Warren had straightened his tie and replied, "I have waited 62 years to walk a daughter down the aisle, so I can manage a few more minutes." The moment I stepped through the door, his breath caught. I watched his face shift through 3 distinct expressions in just 2 seconds, starting with surprise, moving to pride, and ending with something much deeper. It was the raw emotion of a man who spent his life teaching other people's children and who now loved his son's wife as his own. "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen," he said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, straightened his jacket, and offered his arm. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." I gladly took his arm. For the very first time that day, I felt the crushing weight of the morning lift from my shoulders. The toxic group text, the unreturned invitation, and those bragging Dubai posts all seemed to melt away, settling far behind me where they belonged. Warren's arm was rock steady under mine, his steps incredibly measured. He had actually practiced this walk 3 times in his living room the night before. Janet told me later that she had watched him from the kitchen as he counted his paces, making sure his timing was absolutely right. He wanted this moment to be perfect for me, and it was. As the heavy doors opened, a string quartet began to play. I only remember the warm sunlight. The golden afternoon light poured across the vineyard lawn in long sheets, catching the tops of the white chairs and the fresh petals scattered along the aisle. 120 people stood up and turned to look at us. I could hear the gentle rustle of formal wear, the quiet gasps, and the soft sniffing of someone already crying in the 3rd row. Warren and I stepped forward together in unison. His pace was steady, and I matched his stride perfectly. I held my bouquet in my left hand while gripping his strong arm with my right. He placed his free hand over mine, keeping it there for the entire walk. I scanned the crowd, Nora wiping tears, Sarah grinning, and Liam waiting with a tight jaw. Then, my eyes drifted to the 2 chairs in the front row on the bride's side. They had white paper signs taped to them that read "Reserved," but they were completely empty. The seats were perfectly placed and perfectly vacant. 2 quiet rectangles of absence in a massive sea of people who had actively chosen to show up for us. Marcus's camera caught the entire moment in a slow, silent pan from my face to the empty chairs and back again. It lasted about 5 seconds with no narration and no dramatic music. Just a bride walking past where her parents should have been, arm in arm with the man who chose to stand by her instead. 120 people watched, some knowing the painful truth, some not. But everyone who looked at those empty chairs understood the silent story they told. Ruth sat alone on my family's side of the aisle, just 3 seats down from the vacant spots, tears streaming freely down her face without her even bothering to wipe them away. When we reached the altar, Warren gently released my arm. He took my hand, carefully placed it into Liam's hand, and leaned in close enough that only the 2 of us could hear. "She is the best thing that has ever happened to our family," he said softly. Liam nodded his head and whispered back, "I know." Liam had written his own vows, and I had written mine. His were shorter than mine, but they ended up hitting us both much harder. "Tori," he said, holding both of my hands, "I cannot promise you a perfect life, or that we will never fight about the dishwasher, but I promise you this. I will always be in the one place that matters. I will always show up. And I will never make you wonder whether you are enough." I did not trust my voice after that, so I read my vows from a folded paper, knowing I would forget everything if I just looked at him. Our ceremony ended with a kiss and a loud cheer. We walked back up the aisle, past those empty chairs, and past 120 guests who would surely go home to talk about those 2 reserved seats in the front row. Later, at the reception, Warren stood up to give his toast. He stood up proudly with his glass of iced tea and shared a story with the room that I had never heard before. The very first time Tori came to our house for dinner, she stood frozen in the doorway for 30 seconds before Liam finally nudged her inside. She was holding a bottle of Pinot Noir like it was a life vest, and I thought to myself, this woman has been waiting her entire life for someone to tell her she belongs somewhere. He raised his glass high to the crowd. Tori, you belong here. You always have. Marcus captured every single reaction on camera. The laughter, the happy tears, the clinking glasses, and the band starting up. He told me later that night that he had never filmed anything like it. I remember the exact moment the camera stopped rolling at 11 o'clock that night. The red light went dark, but honestly, my real story was only just beginning. If you have ever wondered what happens when the absolute truth finally gets exposed, not by screaming or some big dramatic confrontation, but simply through the silent lens of a camera, then I need you to stay with me. Because what happened next is the exact reason this wedding video reached over 14 million people. 2 weeks after the wedding, our videographer Marcus sent me an email with a private link to the rough cut. It was 22 minutes long and titled Modern Ceremonies, Tori and Liam. I watched it completely alone. Liam was still at work, the entire house was dead quiet, and as the footage played, it was breathtakingly beautiful. Marcus had woven everything together beautifully. The rehearsal dinner, the ceremony, the speeches, our first dance, and that sparkler exit. He used only natural audio, like the string quartet, the clink of glasses, and the laughter during Warren's toast. No voiceover, no dramatic music, just the real sounds of a real wedding. But then came the chairs. Marcus did not add any explanation. He simply held the shot for 5 long seconds. It was a slow, steady frame on 2 white chairs in the very front row. Paper signs that said reserved, but they were completely empty. Sunlight fell across the seats. You could see a shadow moving in the background where the other guests stood, but those chairs remained completely still. Those were the quietest 5 seconds of the entire film, and they said absolutely everything. I called Marcus that very evening, my hands shaking a little. You can publish it, I told him. There was a pause. Are you sure, Tori? Once it is out there, you can never take it back. It is the truth, Marcus, I replied. Those chairs were empty. The camera saw it, and I am not ashamed of being the person who showed up to her own wedding. You really do not want me to cut that part, he asked. No, I said. He exhaled. Okay, I will have it up by Friday. I hung up and sat with the heavy silence. When Liam came home an hour later, he set his bag down and found me staring blankly at the ceiling. Are you good? Liam asked, looking down at me. I told Marcus to post it, I replied. All of it? All of it. He sat down right beside me and squeezed my hand. Then whatever happens, we handle it together. Marcus uploaded the documentary on Friday morning. The title was simple, Modern Ceremonies, Tori and Liam. The thumbnail was just a still frame from the ceremony, Warren and me walking down the aisle, with those 2 empty white chairs visible just behind us. No tacky text, no clickbait, just the image. The first 24 hours were normal, 12,000 views. His subscribers loved it, and the comments were warm, saying it was a beautiful wedding and that Warren was amazing. And then, someone finally asked the question. Wait, are those 2 chairs in the front row empty? Who were they reserved for? Another comment popped up underneath. I think those are the bride's parents' seats. And then another. Where are the bride's parents? Marcus's regulars started chiming in. Some speculated while others asked directly. Marcus did not reply to any of them. He never did. choosing to let his film speak for itself. By hour 36, a wedding planner in New Jersey shared our video in a private Facebook group with 22,000 members. Her caption simply read, "This is the most powerful wedding film I have ever seen. Watch it to the end." The views skyrocketed. 12,000 became 40,000, then 90,000, and then 180,000 in just 48 hours. The comments changed too. They grew longer and intensely personal. One person wrote that their mother skipped their wedding for a sister's baby shower. Another said those empty chairs were them 20 years ago, and seeing my father-in-law walk me down the aisle completely destroyed them. I stayed up reading every single comment that night. Hundreds of strangers were sharing their deepest wounds right under my wedding video. I did not reply. I just read. And for the first time, I did not feel completely alone in my own story. By day 5, we hit 1.2 million views. A parenting blogger in California wrote a piece titled "The Empty Chairs That Broke the Internet," embedding our video. It was shared 11,000 times in just 2 days. On day 6, a Reddit thread appeared titled, "This bride's parents flew to Dubai for her brother's store opening instead of her wedding." It reached the front page within hours, getting 12,000 upvotes and 3,000 comments. By day 8, we were at 4.7 million views. A regional news outlet in Connecticut even ran a segment using the still frame of the empty chairs. They did not name us, thankfully, as Marcus had left out our last names. By day 10, we hit 7 million views, and interview requests poured in. A morning show producer, 2 podcast hosts, a magazine editor. Marcus forwarded them all to me. I declined every single one of them. "You do not owe anyone your story," Liam told me. "The video already told it," I replied. My phone vibrated constantly with friend requests, direct messages, and emails from strangers thanking me for making them feel seen. I read some, but I never responded. I was not ready to be a public figure. I had only wanted to get married. Nora called me that week asking, "Tori, the video is everywhere. Are you okay?" "I think so," I told her. But then she asked, "Are your parents watching this?" Honestly, I had been desperately trying not to think about that. Somewhere across the ocean, in a Dubai hotel room, on a return flight, or in the house where my sealed invitation still sat on the counter, my parents were about to discover what 14 million strangers already knew. And there was nothing I could do to control what happened next. My brother Derek found out first. One of his business partners texted him the link on a Tuesday afternoon with no context, just the address and a question mark. "Is this your sister?" Derek watched the video in his office above the new store in Dubai. That was the store that had opened to modest foot traffic, leaving him with a lease payment that was already straining his cash flow. He watched the ceremony. He watched Warren walk me down the aisle. He watched the camera hold its gaze on those 2 empty chairs. He immediately called my mother. She was at home in Connecticut by then, having returned from Dubai 4 days after my wedding. My mother answered on the first ring, like she always did for him. "Mom, there is a video," he said, and sent her the link. She watched it on the couch in the living room with the curtains drawn. I only know this because our family friend Ruth told me later. Ruth sat at our kitchen table, listening as my mother watched 22 minutes of the wedding she chose to miss. My mother saw those empty chairs. She saw Warren's hand over mine. She saw 120 guests witnessing the empty space she and my father had left behind. She saw the comments, thousands of them, from strangers calling her selfish, heartless, and unforgivable. My father, Glenn, watched on his phone in the upstairs bedroom and did not come down for an hour. Meanwhile, Derek's Instagram was filling up with messages from people who recognized his face from the Dubai posts. "Isn't this your sister's wedding?" they asked. "Why weren't you there?" People wrote to Derek, asking if our parents really picked a store opening over my wedding, telling him he should be ashamed. He turned off his notifications, but the flood did not stop. The first voicemail from my mother arrived at 2:14 in the afternoon. "Tori, this is your mother. I do not know what that filmmaker was trying to do, but this is not the full story. You know we wanted to be there. Call me back immediately." The second came 40 minutes later, her tone sharp. "This is humiliating, Tori. Everyone at church has seen it. Carol from my prayer group sent it to me. You need to have that video taken down. This is a family matter, not entertainment for strangers." The third voicemail came in just before midnight. Her voice was dripping with defensive guilt. "I am your mother, Tori. I carried you. I raised you. And you let some random camera crew embarrass us in front of the entire internet. Call me, please." I listened to all 3 of those messages the following morning. I sat right there on the cold kitchen floor, my back pressed hard against the lower cabinet, and played them one after another. It was like watching a massive storm roll across a distant field. You know it cannot actually reach you, but you can still feel the atmospheric pressure changing deep in your chest. 3 voicemails, and not a single solitary apology. Just 3 different ways of saying, "How dare you let other people see what we did to you?" There was no, "I am sorry I was not there." No, "I made a terrible mistake," and definitely no, "Can we talk about what happened?" It was just frantic damage control and reputation management. It was the exact same instinct that had governed her entire parenting style for 31 years. Protect the image, ignore the wound. I calmly set my phone on the counter and made breakfast: eggs, toast, and hot coffee. I ate very slowly. Liam sat across from me reading the morning news on his tablet, carefully avoiding asking questions he already knew the answers to. "Are you going to call her back?" he finally asked. "No," I said quietly. He simply nodded and went back to drinking his coffee. By day 14, the video had reached 7.2 million views. The comment section had become something I never anticipated. It was not just people reacting to my story. They were telling their own deep secrets, thousands of them. A woman in Texas whose mother skipped her graduation for a brother's baseball game. A man in Ohio whose parents paid for his sister's wedding, but told him his was too informal to attend. A grandmother who drove 14 hours to her granddaughter's recital because, as she wrote, someone in that little girl's life needs to show up. Strangers were finding healing right under my wedding video, and I did not know how to feel about that. Meanwhile, Derek's Dubai store started receiving a wave of negative online reviews. The blowback within our family and social circle was swift and merciless. People were taking sides, whether we wanted them to or not. My Uncle Pete completely stopped calling us. My Aunt Linda got so overwhelmed by the online drama that she deleted her entire Facebook account. Even 2 of my mother's oldest, closest church friends quietly unfollowed her on Instagram. It was as if the perfect, polished facade my parents had spent their entire lives building was crumbling to dust in real time. All because a camera held its focus on 2 empty chairs, and the world decided to look. It is the small things. In a tight-knit place like our town, those are the ones that cut the deepest. Let's look closely at how this unfolded. Aunt Ruth texted me saying my mother hadn't left the house in 3 days. She was just sitting there, watching the video comments on a loop, until Glenn finally took the router password away. I read that message 3 times, staring at the screen. I didn't feel satisfied, and I didn't feel any revenge. All I felt was a quiet, hollow ache from watching people realize, too late, that their choices have witnesses. It was day 21, and the video was at 14 million views. Marcus's channel had jumped to 320,000 subscribers. Marcus didn't monetize the video. He told me later that he turned down 2 big sponsorship offers because of it. Right at the top of the page, a comment with 47,000 likes sat pinned. It read, "Those 2 empty chairs said more than any speech ever could." I saved that comment. I don't even know why. Maybe because a random stranger on the internet managed to put into one sentence what I had spent 31 years trying to explain to my parents. That absence isn't neutral. Absence is a message. I shut my phone off that evening and went to sit on the porch with Liam. The fireflies were out, and the neighbor's dog was barking in the trees. It was that thick, warm, quiet Connecticut summer night, feeling so incredibly alive. "I didn't plan this," I whispered, looking out into the dark yard. "I know," Liam said gently, reaching over to take my hand. "That's why it is real." The next afternoon, Marcus called me. He wanted to know if I was interested in filming a follow-up documentary, a sort of "Where Are They Now" update. I didn't even hesitate before I told him no. "This isn't some reality television franchise, Marcus," I said. "It is my family." Thankfully, he understood. I didn't want fame or a platform, and I certainly didn't want to become the poster girl for abandoned children. I only wanted what I had always wanted, to be loved by the people who were supposed to love me first. And since that didn't happen, I just wanted the freedom to stop pretending it was okay. 14 million strangers had watched my wedding online, but only the guests in that vineyard actually knew what it felt like to stand there in that moment. And for me, that was enough. Then, the letter arrived on a Monday. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father always wrote in stiff block capitals, the way men raised in small-town New England were taught. Every single letter was the exact same height, with absolutely no flourishes or wasted ink. I opened it at the kitchen table, sitting next to a glass of water I never actually touched. It read, "Tori, I watched the video. I saw those empty chairs. I have no excuse. I was a coward, and I chose the easy path every time your mother asked me to." The letter continued. "I told myself I was keeping the peace, but the truth is, I was keeping the peace for myself, not for you. I know this changes nothing, and a piece of paper cannot fix 31 years of letting you down. But I want you to know that the moment Warren took your arm and walked you down that aisle, something broke inside of me that I do not think will ever heal. He did exactly what I should have done, and he did it far better than I ever could have. I am so sorry, Tori. I am not just sorry for the Dubai trip. I am sorry for every single time before Dubai that made a disaster like Dubai possible. Dad." I read those words twice, folded the paper carefully along its creases, and slid it back into the envelope. When Liam came home, he found the envelope lying on the kitchen table. He read it without asking because he knew I had left it there specifically for him to see. "What are you going to do about this?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I replied. "Not yet, anyway." "Is that okay?" he asked. "It has to be," I said. I chose not to reply to my father's letter. It wasn't about punishing him. It was just that I wasn't sure a single letter, even a beautifully written one, could automatically earn a response after 30 years of silence. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for your own sanity is to let an apology sit without an answer. Then, on a hot Saturday morning in August, Pamela showed up. I was out in the front garden pulling weeds. I had dirt under my nails. My hair was tied back, and I was wearing zero makeup. I certainly was not expecting visitors when a silver car pulled into my driveway. My mother stepped out, and I noticed she had lost weight. Her eyes were red and swollen, not from crying just that morning, but clearly from weeks of non-stop weeping. She was wearing a brand new blouse I had never seen before, which meant she must have bought it specifically for this confrontation. She had dressed up just to come apologize. "We need to talk," she said. I stood up slowly and brushed the dirt off my knees, but I did not invite her inside. "That video destroyed our lives, Tori," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Everyone has seen it. Carol won't even look at me at church anymore," she continued, her hands trembling. I looked straight at her. "You are upset because people finally saw what you did," I said flatly. "You are not actually upset that you did it." She flinched as if I had struck her. "That is not fair, Tori." "Neither was Dubai," I replied. She pressed her hand flat against her chest. "I am sorry. I really am. But you have to understand, Derek needed me. Derek has always needed so much help." I kept my voice perfectly level. "And I was always expected to understand. That was our unspoken arrangement." Her face shifted, and the controlled composure she must have practiced in the car completely shattered. "You are punishing me," she whispered. "You are punishing your own mother." "I'm not punishing you, Mom," I said softly. "I am just done pretending that everything is okay." She stood there on my walkway, visibly shaking. I did not raise my voice to her. There was absolutely no need. "You told Aunt Ruth that Tori will understand, that she always does. You even wrote those words in the group text. You have been saying that my entire life. Every birthday of mine you missed, every dinner you canceled, and every time you chose Derek simply because he was louder and I was easier to ignore." I paused, letting the silence hang between us. "But you were right about one thing. I do understand now. I understand that I deserved so much better than what you gave me." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was crying openly, standing on my walkway with mascara running, her new blouse wrinkling where she had been gripping the fabric. "What do you want from me, Tori?" she begged. "Just tell me what to do and I will do it." "Nothing," I said. "That is the entire point. I do not need anything from you anymore." Those words landed right between us like a heavy door closing, not with a dramatic slam, but with a quiet, final click. I told her that if she truly wanted a relationship with me, a real one instead of the performance she had staged for 3 decades, she would need to go to therapy. Not for my sake, but for her own. Not as a gesture, but as a real commitment. "You lost your sister when you were 19, I added. "I know losing her broke something deep inside of you," I continued. "I have watched that tragedy shape every single choice you have made. But you do not get to break me just to fill up that gap." She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language she couldn't comprehend. "You attached yourself so intensely to Derek because his energy and need for attention reminded you of her. I get it. But that is not my burden to carry, and it was never my job to compete with a ghost." She placed her hand over her mouth. "Go home, Mom. Find a good therapist and do the work. And if you ever come back, do it because you have changed, not because you need my forgiveness to make yourself feel better. Warren was in the one place that mattered on my wedding day, Mom. He stood by my side. You were in Dubai. I turned, walked inside, and shut the door behind me. Through the living room window, I watched her stand motionless on the walkway for 2 full minutes. Finally, she walked back to her car, sat behind the steering wheel for another 3 minutes, and drove away. Sometimes, you and I realize that silence speaks far louder than any scream ever could. I turned my phone back on later that evening, and the screen lit up with a massive number of alerts. I had to count them twice to be sure. 93 missed calls were waiting for me. There were 31 from my mother, Pamela, and 17 from Glenn. There were 8 missed calls from Derek, 12 from Uncle Pete, and 9 from Aunt Linda. There were also 16 calls from numbers I did not recognize. Neighbors, perhaps, or church members who had gotten my number from someone who got it from someone else. It was 93 separate attempts to reach a woman who had spent 31 long years desperately reaching out for them. I held the glowing phone up so Liam could see it. 93, I whispered. He stared at the screen, then looked up at me. How many are you going to return? He asked. 0, I replied. He nodded, not because he necessarily agreed with my decision, but because he trusted my judgment completely. I did not block anyone. I did not change my phone number either. I simply chose not to call back. You see, there is a massive difference between shutting a door and locking it. I left the door unlocked, but I completely stopped standing on the other side of it, waiting and hoping for someone to finally walk through. That very same week, Derek's retail store in Dubai hit its first serious cash flow problem. The foot traffic projections they relied on turned out to be optimistic, and the lease was incredibly expensive. To make matters worse, 2 of his investors backed out after a massive supply chain delay. These were just basic business failures, having nothing to do with the video or with me. But Glenn had put $80,000 into that store. It was the kind of investment you make when your son tells you it is a sure thing and your wife insists that family comes first. That was $80,000 sitting in a storefront in a Dubai shopping district where the rent was due, but the customers were nowhere to be found. You might be wondering if I felt satisfied by this, but I did not. All I felt was the familiar weight of watching people make terrible choices and then wonder why the floor gave out beneath them. Just 3 months later, Derek's store closed down permanently after only 4 months of operation. It was underfunded, the location was all wrong, and the investors pulled out their capital. Derek signed the lease termination and flew home. Glenn lost most of that $80,000. The liquidation recovered some inventory value, but it was still enough to completely ruin the retirement plan he and Pamela had mapped out. Pamela started therapy in late August. She went twice a week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, seeing a specialist in Fairfield who focused on family systems. I did not ask what they discussed. It was not my business anymore. Meanwhile, her church friends remained polite but distant. Conversations that used to last 20 minutes after service now lasted only 3. People remembered the video, but they never brought it up because they did not need to. Eventually, Derek moved back to Connecticut and took a low-paying job at a retail store in Stamford. It was a random Tuesday in October when his name popped up on my phone. 3 short sentences. Tori, I am sorry I took them from you. I did not think about what it cost you. I should have. That was it. It was the first genuine apology I had ever received from any of them. He did not mention the viral video, and he did not complain about public embarrassment. For once, he actually acknowledged how he had drained every resource in our family, financial, emotional, and physical, without ever looking across the dinner table to see if I was still standing. I just read it, saved the screenshot, and decided not to reply. Not yet. 6 months after the wedding, my life had a new, quiet routine. It looked like Sunday dinners at Warren and Janet's house. Their dining table only seats 8 people, but we always end up with 10 because someone always brings a +1. Liam stands at the head, carving whatever roast Janet made, while Warren quizzes us on random trivia from the Sunday newspaper. Ruth drives all the way down from Hartford once a month, always bringing her homemade lemon pastries. They are never quite as good as she thinks, but none of us have the heart to tell her. On Saturday mornings, Nora and I go running for 3 miles along the quiet reservoir. She talks about her kids, and I tell her about the garden bed where I am trying to coax tomatoes to grow. We do not talk about that video anymore. It is just something that happened in the past, not something happening now. Even my calls with Pamela are brief and surface level. She asks me how work is going and what the weather is like. She never brings up the video, and she certainly never mentions Dubai. When she asks about Liam, I can hear a softness in her voice that tells me she is genuinely trying. I have realized that trying looks very different than I once imagined. It is smaller, quieter, and far less dramatic. Even Glenn sent me a birthday card back in September, which was the first one I had received from him in 9 long years. I left it on the kitchen counter, unopened, for a whole week. When I finally tore it open, I saw just 5 words written in his heavy block capital letters. I am proud of you. I should have said it sooner. I cried when I read that, not because I still needed his approval, but because I realized I finally did not. Those tears were not about gaining his approval at last. They were about finally releasing the heavy burden I had carried since I was a little girl. It was the desperate belief that if I just worked harder, ran faster, and smiled more, he would finally notice me. Well, he noticed. It took 14 million strangers watching our family drama online and 2 empty chairs at my wedding, but he finally noticed. Then, in November, a small padded envelope arrived in the mail. I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. Inside was the original wedding invitation, the very one Ruth had hand-delivered to her house, the one that had sat sealed on her kitchen counter for weeks, the one she refused to open. Except now, the seal was broken. It was wide open. Tucked inside, written on a yellow sticky note in Pamela's handwriting, were exactly 8 words. I finally read it. I am sorry it took 14 million strangers to make me pick it up. I stared at it for a moment before putting the invitation away in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I will frame it. Maybe down the road it will mean something different to me. But not yet. I thought about my mother's favorite old refrain. Tori will understand, she would always say. She always does. Well, she was right about one thing. I do understand now. I understand that I deserve so much better. Family is not just a title you inherit. It is a promise you actively keep. If the people who brought you into this world cannot keep that promise, you are fully allowed to build a table where people actually sit down. Warren taught me that. He did not do it with long speeches or empty words. He did it with a pressed navy tie, a steady arm to lean on, and 62 years of showing up for every single person who walked through his front door. That is what real family looks like. It is quiet. It is steady. It is present. This is my story. 2 empty chairs at a wedding, 1 documentary that changed everything, and a father-in-law who never once had to be asked twice to stand by my side. If hearing my story reminded you to call someone in your life who actually shows up for you, please do it today. Let them know they matter. Make sure to drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.